Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar. We're back. We're back, baby.
We're back, baby.
Book 2, Spirits. It's the Rebel Spirit episode of Korra. It's an interesting one, Chris.
Have you missed us, Dan? You missed Korra?
I have missed. You know what? I have missed Korra, but it's. I think I've said this before, but I always miss the one we're not doing. Like 2 episodes from now in Korra, I'm going to be thinking about the next series of Rewind reviews, and then in the next series of Rewind reviews, 2 or 3 episodes in, I'll be thinking about the next series of Korra. Like I'm always, my brain is always like looking forward to whatever the next thing is. I don't know what that is. I don't know what the name for that mental health condition is, but it's but there's no known cure. Just enjoy what's happening now, Dan. No, but the things that are in the future.
You gotta live in the moment, man.
Yeah, live in the moment. Obviously, a lot changed again, Chris, in our lives from the previous season. I bet all my hot dog mogul money on the horses. Lost it.
Yeah,
back to doing this podcast.
I got the kids in a band, but that band didn't succeed. So I just keep having kids and keep trying. Just a constant stream of failed bands. I'm now thinking that maybe like 1 or 2 kids from each band should get together and form a super group, and that's the way to do it. The others are just gonna have to, go to work or something. They're only 10, but still,
I'm really looking forward to seeing how that story develops by the 3rd and 4th seasons of Korra.
yeah, I know, right?
New tradition every year. So I lost all my money, and that's why I'm back to podcasting. Otherwise, you guys could have just, fucking sucked it. Like, I'd have been gone. I don't think I've ever, you just so rarely see in the UK, like, hot dog vendors on the street, or, remember when we were at Bournemouth, there was a hot dog shop, briefly? Yes. There was like a hot dog, like, late night place where people went, and often people wouldn't go for hot dogs. But yeah, like sort of. It's funny you should say that, because there was literally this week one outside of Charing Cross Station, and I was like, you don't see that every day, and he was there every day, like for the week. Like I was like, it turns out you do see that every day. Like I walked past him several times. Although one time I walked past it, Chris. Right, this is how busy his business was. One time, and let me tell you, Charing Cross Road, right, Charing Cross Station, that's a lot of foot traffic. This is not, one person milling about. This is a crowd of people filtering past, especially at rush hour. I walked past, hot dog stand completely abandoned. No one anywhere near it. No employee, no whatever. And he's on the other side of the street smoking a cigarette. And I watch him run over, cross with the crowd and go back. And no one touched it. No one looked at it. That's how few customers he had. That he was confident with those crowds.
Did you ever see him serving a hot dog?
No, not once. Not once. He had 6 prepared that I saw as I walked past. But
Same 6 every day.
I just think, though, same 6. I just think, right, even if I was feeling like a hot dog, right, even if I was dead hungry, I'd just finished my shift, I was coming home, I passed the hot dog man, I get a whiff of it, and it's even the thing I'm feeling, right, like I really feel like a hot dog. I don't know if I'm buying it off a street vendor guy. Yeah, feels like a quick way to get, food poisoning. And I'm not suggesting this particular proprietor, if anyone sees this guy outside of Charing Cross, is doing anything at all he shouldn't be. I'm sure his food is perfectly edible and is perfectly safe.
Well,
even maybe delicious. Who knows?
He's gone to the effort of crossing the road for his cigarette, for one.
Right. So some level of consciousness about how his food tastes. So I'm sure he's doing a wonderful job. It's just a perception thing. It's purely perception. Yeah. I'm not doing it. Not cooked meats.
I think we should discuss Korra at some point, but I think I would only ever order a hot dog from like a restaurant, or like a burger restaurant, or make it myself. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever I wouldn't go cinema hot dog, which I know is a controversial thing. I know a lot of people love a cinema hot dog, but it's just I just look at them rotating and just think, how long have you been rotating there, buddy?
Well, I got some insight on that from my youth.
and my days working in a cinema, they come out the packet, they are edible cold because they're pre-cooked, right? And the cinema staff temp them every 30 minutes, right? The reason being that because once you take it out the packet, it's exposed to the air and is rotating. It could theoretically acquire, germs of some sort from the air. So they temp check it because 99.8% of germs die or can't survive above 63 degrees. So the hot dog must be kept above that temperature. And if they temp check it every half an hour, if it drops below that temperature, they bin it because then it can have germs on it. And they have to track it all on paperwork. And then after, I think it's 3 hours, they bin them, just told. They're not supposed to be out for more than 3 hours.
Oh, okay. There is a limit on that then. Okay.
But this is what I'm saying. Doesn't matter. All that logic, all true. I still feel the same way. This is what I'm saying. Like, I walked past Mr. Venderman outside the. Of course, I'm jealous because my hot dog business. I blew it all on a.
Yeah.
I bet on a country to win Eurovision that wasn't in Eurovision and lost all my money.
But also what's crazy about this is like it's a hot dog. Do you know what I mean? They're a big. Just the fact that you're eating it alone is a flight risk. Let alone the quality. Can I just say, I think we're 8 minutes in, and I think with Korra more than any other podcast we do. You can really tell when we're recording it during the weekday and when we're recording it at the weekend.
Yes.
As people may be able to guess, this is a Saturday morning recording, baby.
Yeah, we got all the time in the world. All right, let's get to it then.
Sometimes we squeeze Korra in like the day during like lunch.
And we're so efficient when we do that.
I know.
Which is really frustrating because it means all these years we've been tangenting. We could have been efficient. we do have the ability. We just don't want to. That's so much worse. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Yeah.
Recap the episode,
right?
Danny.
Well, this is a simple one to recap. This is the episode for those who don't recall, where Korra and Tenzin start a journey that is supposed to be a journey to all the various air temples to get Korra in connected with her spirits, but they're stopping off first the Southern Water Tribe for a sort of. Let's be honest, fake Christmas, Korra Christmas, like the Southern Spirits Festival or something like that. I wrote the name down, but it's not immediately in front of me in my notes. But I'll find that in a bit, and we'll name it properly. But this festival is being attended by her dad, who is the leader of the Southern Water Tribe, and they're visiting from the Northern Water Tribe her uncle, her dad's brother, who is Unalaq. Unalaq. So Tonrock is her dad, Unalaq is her uncle, and he believes he can teach Korra the ways of the spirits, and that the Southern Water Tribe have kind of lost their mojo when it comes to the spirit stuff. They've kind of commercialized it, and in the end, a spirit attacks the city, or the town, whatever you want to call it, the tribe, and Tenzin is not able to help. Her dad is not able to help. She's not able to help. The only person who seems to be able to calm the spirit down is Unalaq, thus confirming Korra's theory that maybe Unalaq is the guy that can teach her how to control spirits and connect more to her spiritual side rather than Tenzin. So she makes the choice, and Tenzin carries on his trips to the air temples, now kind of a family vacation rather than a trip with the Avatar, and Korra stays behind with Unalaq. That's the setup. It's pretty straightforward. I think what I like, and we'll stick with this episode now. There's some stuff to talk about from the end of last season, I think. We'll come back to that. A little teaser. I'm going to do a thing at the end of this episode, and maybe a couple of episodes this year, where we go back through a little bit of feedback we received from the previous season, because the downside to this Korra show is that it's only like 10 to 14 episodes a year, and by the time the episodes are releasing, generally speaking, we finished recording them. So we didn't get a chance to see anyone's feedback before the last series of Korra was airing. Oh, no, we finished recording before it was airing, which means we never got to address any feedback we received. So we got some feedback about our thoughts on the final episode, so we'll come back to that. But in terms of this episode, setting up a new season, it is quite a simple story, but I think I think with Korra, because the show is kind of serialized in a different way to Avatar, it's kind of like it's the setup. It's the beginning of that story. It's the first few minutes of the movie. It's like what's the inciting incident? What's the thrust for this season? What's Korra's goal for this season? She just needs to learn about the spirits. What's the scenario? Like from a character perspective, she's dropped one tutor for another. Following really struggling to get her head around it previously. Can you judge where the series is going from that? No. So how do you judge this episode as a piece of that story? All you can sort of do is go, well, did this effectively set up a story I'm interested in for the rest of this series? That's all this episode required to do. Whereas with, the original show, Last Airbender, each episode kind of had its own A to B to C sort of like plot that started and ended within that episode, or across 2 episodes if it was like a 2-parter. It's much harder with Korra because it's so much more. Isn't it weird how a show that can be so much more serialized also ends up having more compressed stories because they're across 1 season instead of 3? It's a weird format, Korra. But yeah, so it's not got that episode to episode plotline thing. So it becomes tricky, especially with the first episode of a series, to be able to judge what it's going for. But for me, at least, I really enjoyed this episode. I think this is a really strong start to a series, a really interesting setup, and it introduces a bunch of characters that I'm really fond of. And it's reasonably funny, and there's some good action. So, sort of, to overall thoughts, I quite like this one. But over to, of course, our resident newbie. I'm coming to for those who are jumping on this podcast now, which would be a weird thing to do this many episodes in. But if you're jumping on now, Chris never seen these episodes before, which is why it's the late Airbender. Because he's late to the show. How are you feeling about the start of Korra season 2? Season 1 excused, because I know we had some concerns with the way that ended.
I think 2 points. One, anyone jumping on now, if you don't think they've left during our 10-minute hot dog tangent, then I think you gotta have a think about yourself, Dan, because those people have gone. Those people are like, there must be other reviews of Korra out there. I'm not going to not withstand the end of series 1 actually, because I think that's relevant. Because obviously, you got to remember, one of our big complaints about the end of series 1 was the fact that they seem to set up these really great stories, and then kind of in 2 minutes in sort of get rid of them all, like, oh well, she's got her powers back now, and that kind of stuff. So one of the things I found most impressive about this episode is it made me not mind that, because I was like, oh, okay, well, this is actually probably more interesting and more unique and different than the hero who's lost her powers. Every second or third movie in any naughty superhero franchise did that story.
Well, actually, before you go very quickly. Actually, you're right, because her losing her powers, so she just had air left last season. If they'd have carried on that thread, and the remaining 3 seasons of Korra had been her regaining fire, earth, and water, that's just Aang's story. That's not even every, that's not even every story for every cartoon for the noughties. That's literally the last show this. So actually, now you framed it that way, that's a really good point. That's a really, really good point. That, as interesting as that idea was to us when we were talking about season 1, in actuality, that's probably just Aang's story, and that's not great.
Yeah, and I think, we've never looked at spirits in a different way. We've never... I'm really intrigued. I don't know his name, obviously. I probably won't learn it until we no longer need to. Yeah. Let's call him... let's call him... What's Korra's dad called?
Tonrock.
Okay, well, we'll call him the Bad Rock then. Bad
I don't
rock,
know. Bad Dodgy rock, good rock, Tonrock,
Dodgy rock, Dodgy rock. Because this is my point. I don't know. I flip flopped in the episode. At one point, I'm like, "Oh, is he the villain? Is he the one?" Like, it seems pretty. He wants to train her. That's not being allowed to happen. A spirit attacks. He's able to tame the spirit. Oh, now she's being trained by him. Like, it feels to me like typically the twist there would be,
you know, he sent the spirit. He's able to tame the spirit because he's on side with the spirits. Maybe
like he contrived that sequence of events to be the one teaching Korra. Right.
Yeah, he Mysterio'd it, you know, and maybe the spirits. He needs Korra to unlock something that only the Avatar can do to get his plan to come to fruition. So that's why. But then at the end, I'm like, well, that's really bold to have an Avatar trained by the villain. So maybe, I mean, the end bit of "I've got grand plans for you" is like a bit ominous, but maybe.
I wrote that line down. "I have great plans for you" is like the most typical menacing villain line, you know, I could think of, and
yeah,
it's almost so overt that you sort of second guess it and you go, well, maybe that's not where it's going. Maybe they're just sort of, because I think the morality of the characters in Korra is always a bit mixed anyway, right? Like the villains in Avatar, ultimately, not Zuko excluded, because Zuko was always on an arc, you know, going from bad to good. He was always, you know, going from one side of the spectrum to the other. Other than that, the rest of the characters in Avatar are very cleanly terrible people or very good people. There wasn't a lot of middle ground. It had a very simple morality. And this is an older show. It's aimed at a slightly older audience. The characters are more mature than the characters in Aang. It's kind of grown up with the audience, right? And I think as a result,
and sorry to interrupt, but and with television trends, I know Avatar was, you know, at a time where prestige television was coming in, but we definitely have more anti-heroes. We definitely have more grey areas in terms of morality in more recent television than older.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what's interesting about Korra as a show is its villains are, I think, more complicated and maybe even more interesting than Avatar's. You know, Fire Lord Ozai was not. He was a great threatening villain, but he wasn't a particularly interesting character. He was the bad guy in the obvious sense, right? So what I like about this show, if you specifically look at the first season, because the first season we've seen that, we know who the villains were and weren't. You know, Amon was quite complex as a villain, as was his brother. What was it, Tarlok? You know, they were really interesting characters with a real morality scale to them. They weren't just outright mustache twirly villains. They had goals and things they were trying to achieve. You know, in the end, you could argue they undercut that slightly with Amon, because actually it was a power grab, because he didn't necessarily believe some of his own his own rhetoric. But I think that's often true of dictators. They often just say the thing they think that'll get them, power. I think that the morality of this show is way more complicated, and that makes it way more interesting. I'm not saying necessarily better as a show, but in terms of how it's handling its villains thus far, looking specifically at Season 1, I think Korra's done a really good job of making that morality quite complex. And then you look at what we've got here in Season 2, and we've got a character that you're like, could be the villain, might not be the villain, might not be either, might be somewhere in the middle where he becomes an antagonist because he has different goals, but might not necessarily be evil. Right? That's on the table. And that wouldn't have been on the table in Avatar, I don't think, in Last Airbender. You know, I think we're in a really interesting situation here where we're looking at a character like Unalaq and wondering what his motives are, wondering what his plans are. Is he mustache twirly? Is he going to be a good guy? You know, we had concerns last year about Tarlok. Tarlok ended up doing the right thing in the end. I mean, the murder-suicide aside, he did try to stop his brother. He was trying to stop him on the whole time. He went about it the wrong way. So yeah, we're in a situation now where we're looking at this character and wondering what his goals are, and I think that's the intent. I think they absolutely wanted you to come away from this episode wondering about Unalaq and his plans and what he's up to and whether he can be trusted. Because Korra's supposed to be wondering that. Right? So we're in her shoes. So yeah.
And I just think the setup of that, I'm a little bit concerned isn't the right word, but I think this show, and it will be interesting to see how it develops, but I know we discussed
you know, we discussed. We didn't. I don't know if we even used this phrasing, but I think the headline discussion of Team Avatar last year could be: you can say you're a team all you want, but like we need to really see it. And so I'm a little bit like, is it going to continue to be? I don't know how they all go with her on this journey, particularly. So, you know, are we going to have separate stories with Marco and his policing, and separate stories with Bolin? Have I got that the right way around?
Mm-hmm. You have,
yeah,
yes.
With Bolin and
his fire ferrets.
What's what's the name of the
Asami? Yes, Asami with Future Industries. Yes.
So are we going to have separate stories with Bolin and Asami maybe working together, maybe Bolin and the Fire Ferrets, which I thought was great fun joke and brilliant scenes with them doing business. But you know, that's interesting to me. It feels like we've set up separate stories, and even
Tenzin
I thought that was quite Tenzin and the family, and I was particularly struck by that one because I feel like any time we've had separate stories before on this show and before in Avatar, they've either been like the villain or they've been Team Avatar. You know, if Sokka had an episode, well, he's Team Avatar. If Zuki-Poo's had an episode, well, we're exploring the villain, and ultimately that will service the story of Aang and
eventually become Team Avatar.
And eventually become Team Avatar, and you know, maybe Tenzin in the family's story. And I loved how the siblings were characterized. By the way,
we'll come back to them in a minute. Yeah, we have to have a chat about Bumi and Kaya for sure.
Maybe their story obviously most likely will service Korra, but as in the character, not the show. But the fact of, you know, having a disparate story involving them, that felt oddly bold to me, because it's usually Team Avatar or the villain. So I was very intrigued by that. I was like, oh, okay, he's not going to be a master, but he is sticking around, and it'll be interesting to track that, because I want him to stick around because he's relevant to Korra. I don't want him to stick around because it ticks those nostalgia buttons of Aang.
Right. Yes, and that's what's interesting about this show, is it has the power to break formula because it is a new show. You know, what you're referring to is really the formula established by Last Airbender. There's nothing to say Korra can't do something different, separate the characters, bring them back together, do storylines from different places. You know, it does a little bit feel like Korra is more of an ensemble show than Last Airbender's, you know, was. Aang felt very much like the protagonist, you know. And while they did do side episodes based on other characters, whole episodes that Aang wasn't in, on the whole, the show really, really was his journey. And the other characters were just on that ride. I feel like Korra feels more like the group's journey. And that group doesn't necessarily mean, quote-unquote, Team Avatar in the traditional sense, but it's feeling free to do stuff differently to Aang, and it's, you know, to Last Airbender, and I think that's right. I think that's correct. I think this show would only feel like a hollow, shallow copy of Last Airbender if it tried to do that. Taking this show and using it as an opportunity to tell different kinds of stories in that world and do different things and to experiment a bit more is exactly what they should be doing. And I think that's exactly correct. And I really like that idea too. And I even remember when I first watched this being so intrigued as to where it was going. And I think it's fair to assume that as much as they're separating now, they probably will somehow come back together, even if they end up spending most of the season apart and we're getting two very separate stories. You feel like the show is smart enoughly written. You trust the writers enough to know that they need to bring them back together at some point. Not just make one story feel like a complete waste of time on the side while the real adventure is happening elsewhere. You know, you've got to trust that the writers know what they're doing on that front.
Yeah, of course, but you've always got a danger where you've got, you know, how many times have we reviewed a show and been like, okay, there's 3 stories going on, and every time it cuts to Y, we just want to cut back to X. So they've got to be, you know, they've still got to be careful.
They do have the back pocket though of the siblings and my interest in Aang's family.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I was thinking more of Bolin and Asami when I said that.
Oh, right, apologies. Yes, sorry. Yeah, so in my head, the real... Because we're not really sure exactly where Korra is going, what Korra is doing. We don't know how separate she's going to be from Mako and Bolin. You know, with that, they've not really clarified that. We don't really know what Unalaq's plan is. She's like, I'll teach with you, and he's not really said what he's going to do with her. So the only split we know for sure right now is the family and Korra. But I think you're right to wonder, can she continue training and still being in the orbit of, you know, Bolin, who's clearly helping Asami, but also got fire ferrets on his docket. He's a busy guy. Mako, who's become a police officer, he's obviously going to be a busy guy. He can't just take extended time off work to hang out with his girlfriend. Like, you know, it's you're right. There's going to be a natural divide there, and how that splits is going to be really interesting to see. So let's talk about the because there's no answer to that one yet. Stick around. We'll come back to that subject as the series progresses, because right now it's an interesting situation, but we don't, you know, certainly, you know, we haven't gotten to how that plays out yet. So I'm sure we'll track how the show has split the characters and divided them as the series goes on. In terms of the characters themselves, a few new characters introduced this week. Let's start with the siblings of Aang. How are you feeling about Kaya and Bumi, especially in the wake of Bumi's rather unfortunate introduction to us at the end of the previous season, just howling at the moon?
Relieved with Bumi, to be honest with you. Whilst you know the character has been named after Bumi,
yes,
Aang wasn't Bumi, so I didn't want Bumi too, because that wouldn't have made sense to me. I'd have been like, oh, he coincidentally,
if he,
you know, turned into
if he was
almost
Bumi,
Bumi's
we'd have
son.
some questions for Katara.
Well, exactly. Yeah. If he was, you know, if he was full Bumi, then Katara. What's Katara been up to? Because I've just realised how old Bumi was.
Yeah, I regret everything we've just said.
I blame you for that.
That's fair.
I didn't realise.
I take full blame. If you're gonna yell at us in the comments for making a terrible joke, you can just don't yell at both of us. Just yell at me. I'm Dan, by the way, for anyone who can't tell the difference between our voices.
It was like I was on the beach and I fell in a hole and I just kept walking, just kept like, you know, not realising I was in a hole. So I'm like, you know, the shot of him howling at the moon suggests Bumi, and I'm thinking I don't particularly want Bumi. So I was pleased to see he was just more reflective of Aang's playful side, and to be honest with you, I kind of felt between the three of them, that we kind of got all facets of both Aang and Katara, and we really truly saw all three of their personalities, sort of, and the different facets of those personalities split across these three children. So I really liked that, and like you, I do want to spend more time with them for sure. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting to explore where Aang came from. You know, the instinct feels like you'd almost want to explore more what happened to Aang in the gap, what happened to Aang in the period between Avatar and Korra.
What kind of father was he, you know?
Yeah, and hopefully maybe some of that stuff does get explored within that framing of, you know, let's see his home.
I really liked that Katara recognised fractures between the siblings, maybe. There's that shot where they're sort of like, you know, reverting to being children and poking at each other and stuff, and Katara's watching from the distance and she looks all knowing, and then at the end she's the one who basically tells Tenzin that his siblings are coming with him, and doesn't give him a lot of choice on that matter. And I think that's very wise of Katara. I think she's spotted divide. She wants to see them together and united, and, you know, maybe a bit more, I don't know, being able to get, you know, help each other more. She refers to Sokka when she talks about them traveling together, and I think that's a really sweet idea. And I think that says a lot about Katara, and I think it says a lot about like how wise she's become as well. Not to say the original sort of you know, young version of Katara we got in Last Airbender wasn't wise, but I think she's clearly gotten wiser with age, and I think that's really neat to see. And I like the current dynamic of those siblings, and I'm again, the first part of a story, hard to judge. But even when I watched this originally, very excited to see where that goes and how that develops.
Yeah, she feels like a truly adult version of the character that we know. You know, she feels like that character aged up. I want to know, speaking of new characters, the zany businessman, is he what you described as your favourite character that we haven't seen yet?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a lot of people guessed. Some people didn't know. Last year, I mentioned that my favourite character was introduced this season. It's Varric. I love Varric. Everything about him. I think he's very funny. I think he's a real force of chaos. I think he becomes a really interesting character to have around serious plots in later episodes. We'll talk more about it when we get there. But Varric as a character is just my favourite. He's such a clever choice. He's performed brilliantly. He's so unique to the world of Avatar. There is not a character like him. And I think he's reflective as well of like these sort of like, you know, and it feels so weird that the show was what it was, because it just feels so reflective of like these kind of almost like idiot businessmen that we've got. These people with a lot of money to invest, surround themselves with yes men, do lots of insane stuff, and some of it works and they get hailed as geniuses. And it's just very funny to see, like with the way we're introduced to Varric in this episode, where he's like, and I was levitating, and everyone's like, yeah, you absolutely were. Yeah, it's very much an Emperor's New Clothes situation. And then Bolin's the only one to be like, it looked like you were just sitting there. And he's like, real straight shooter, see? I love all of that. I love that he's invented film, and he's calling them movers, and he's gone. The way he does it, right? Julie, do the thing. She plays the footage. It's the footage of like, looks like a chocobo from Final Fantasy, but some sort of ostrich bird thing running, and he goes, "It's amazing. It's mind blowing, right? Now forget that. That's the past." And he's like. It's just such a chaotic energy. The show really needs that. Like, I can't express how much the first season of the show sometimes suffers from being almost too straight-laced. All the characters are adults. They're all behaving very rationally. And while that is standard for a TV show, there's just a little chaotic energy that it's missing, I think, to really feel like the world of Avatar. And I think you got that a lot in the original show from Aang when he was playing up, when he was younger. And even when Aang got older and he got more serious and the plots around him got more serious, we had Toph to sort of give us some chaotic energy and always have a different opinion to the other guys and sort of come at things a bit sideways. And I think, you know, and Sokka also provided that sometimes too. Because they were young, they were able to do that. But you've got a much older cast in this show, and we can't just keep relying on fart jokes and fart bending jokes from the youngest kid, because no one wants that. So I think the introduction of an adult character that can bring that level of chaos is so clever and so vital. And I love everything about him. Why didn't anyone tell me? Now I look like an idiot. It's just everything he said made me laugh in this episode, and he is by far one of the most entertaining characters. He's visually, I think we talked about this previously, because I think because we a little under the curve, we watched this episode further back before recording this than we usually do, and I think when we had a very brief conversation about this, I think you mentioned you thought you looked like Prince. Is that right?
Yeah, I did say it felt like there were Prince vibes, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because that's right, because you mentioned the Kevin Smith thing. For those who don't know, Kevin Smith used to do like sort of these improvised stand-up shows, and even with Kevin Smith, people would ask questions, and he would sort of tell stories based on it. Find his story about Prince. There is some, actually, not even visually, I just think, like, character-wise, the insanity of Varric does feel a bit Prince. That's true. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, you just hear stories of, like, Prince, like one of my favourite ones, it was Jimmy Fallon's story about playing ping pong with him, and he just seemed like a wonderfully charismatic and like extravagant. No, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
offbeat.
Offbeat, like brilliant, warm character, and you kind of get similar vibes with this fella. I really enjoyed that scene, and I just enjoyed Bolin, proving useful, and I enjoyed seeing, I'm intrigued by Asami's troubles and seeing the follow on, the fallout from all of that stuff.
I think one fear that you could have at this stage is that they'll try and make that that relationship romantic, and we definitely don't need that. I think, I like Asami and Bolin being friends. I think this is one of those times the writers need to bite their tongues a bit,
but
hold back
the
from more love triangle bullshit or love quadrangle.
The problem is, Dan, I saw series 1 of this show, so I don't believe that you can put any two characters on the screen together and there not be the potential that it's going to be romantic.
Yeah. Good stuff. So I do like it, and I think you're right. In the context of this episode, they're a really fun. It's a fun dynamic, and I like that Bolin proves useful. And I really like this idea that that Varric is going to help Future Industries, which obviously keeps him around, which is always good. But also, I like the idea that like he's got this movers thing. He's immediately gone from footage of a wild animal to I'm going to put an attractive lady in front of the camera. And make her do poses, because like he's like so tapped into the market already. And we had that great shot of Bolin basically drooling, which I thought was very funny.
Well, she was essentially Jessica Rabbit, wasn't she? Like,
yes, right. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a funny idea. Let's see. So we talked. Let's go on.
Let's talk about the Christmas of it all, because it's funny as you said about it being basically Christmas. I just remembered it's not relevant to this, and take a shot. We're mentioning one of our
I knew you were going to bring
references.
this up.
But it really just made me smile, and it's not as egregious as the memory of Doctor Who running out of ways to make Christmas specials feel Christmassy, and Moffat literally going, the town and the planet's called Christmas. No, the planet wasn't called Christmas, obviously, but the town's called Christmas. it's Christmas all year round. And you're like, okay, come on now. Like, I think you could just have another story set in December. Like, just do it that way.
Oh, my laptop just blooped at me. Let me mute that. There we
go.
Yes.
It's not as egregious as that. Just the memory of that made me smile. I think that's
so it's called a Glacier Spirits Festival, and basically it's quite good, because I think it's a pretty good, because it's not just the visuals of Christmas. All right, so we're in the Southern Water Tribe, so we've got snow. Then they've lit it up for this festival in multicolored lights. It immediately feels warm and Christmassy. There's kind of a festival. There's like games and like stalls selling food, and like, hot dog vendors with questionable hot dogs because they've been away from the cart for a few minutes while they had a fag. Should clarify, by the way, actually, in England the word fag is a term for cigarettes. Before I've just realised what I may have accidentally started there.
Yeah. Between that and the Boomy thing, Dan is determined this season to get us cancelled.
Yeah, I am so cancelled. This is how I get out of this podcast to restart my hot dog business. I just get myself cancelled, so I don't have to do it anymore. And let me tell you, you know what? I think that Trump guy has some really good ideas.
Jesus.
He's in trouble right now. For those of you who don't know, we're recording this on the 10th of June. Have a look back at what happened around the 9th of June.
How many times? Was it John Oliver, like last week tonight, that did the "we got him" thing every time, and every time nothing fucking happened. You and I have had this exact conversation before, where it's like, oh, he's fucked now, and I'm like, is he? And you're like, dude, there's no way he's not fucked. And then like 2 months later, it's like, Trump might be going for re-election.
That's true. That's true. This is to be fair, this is the closest. I mean, this is the worst he's ever had in terms of like he's actually being charged with like federal crimes, and that is not nothing. That's the first time that's happened for sure. So this is the first like genuine like actual movement on this career criminal seeing some level of justice for the crimes, plural. And I said to Nadia the other day, he was indicted fairly recently for the other thing. Which one? Which crime was that one for? I couldn't remember because there's so fucking many. Anyway, doesn't matter. We're talking from the past. It may have all played out, blown over, gone forward. Who knows by now? So you can enjoy laughing at past Dan and Chris, dear listeners, in the comments with that. But anyway, the Glacier Spirits Festival. Yeah, I quite liked it. I think we've talked in the past about, and I thought you were going to bring this up earlier, and you went a different way. There was an old episode of Steven Universe that we had a bit of a debate about because I didn't like its use of Christmas iconography.
Oh yeah, God, I remember that. Yeah,
so the reason, for anyone who's wondering, well, Dan's sounding a bit hypocritical. He seems to quite enjoy it here. I do, and I think the reason it's different for me is the Christmas iconography here is to help establish something about the world, because what we're learning about the Southern Water Tribe is they've commercialized their spiritual holiday and they've used mild Christmas themes to help communicate that. And it's about a cultural thing. It's about where they are as a people, right? It's about, because it's not Earth, it's not our world, that their religion has gone the same way as one of our religions in terms of our spiritual holiday has become a homogenized, commercialized thing that almost everyone seems to celebrate, regardless of whether they're practicing the spiritual side of it. And that's a thing that's really happening in our world, and it's a parallel for Korra. What I didn't like in Steven Universe was that it was just a cheap way to do character stuff and sort of make Steven a Christ analogy, a Christ metaphor, in a world where arguably that exists already. And it was so overt, like it wasn't even subtle. It was, I mean, you could argue this is subtle. You certainly couldn't argue it with that. So yeah, there's quite a big difference between the two things before anyone starts pulling out their pitchforks. God, I really am trying to get myself cancelled this week, aren't I? It's the theme of the episode.
I really liked that notion that, you know, it was essentially Christmas and like a Christmas parade, and I really enjoyed what it did for it visually. Like in particular, the fight with the spirit. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, wow, did Shane Black direct this sequence? Like it's just, aesthetically,
just checking the credits for you, Chris. No, sadly not. No, Shane Black.
Aesthetically, it felt so different to not just, you know, Avatar, but the last season of Korra. Like, it just felt visually really unique. And the fact that I'm still saying that, you know, so many episodes into Korra, I'm still going, oh, yeah, no, it just feels different. Like, looks visually cool, doesn't it? Like, I mean, fundamentally, it's an animation. Like, that's fantastic that I'm still saying that, even if I am sounding a bit repetitive at this point. I just thought that sequence was they really utilized the setting of essentially a Christmas market.
Yeah, it was really good to look at. Like it was very pleasing to the eye. I mean, the contrast of the dark spirit shape with the bright lights just looked really cool, and the fight itself was really good too. And one of my favorite moments of the entire episode is in that, which is Tenzin attempting to reason with the spirit and then just getting yeeted, just like gone. like it's the best non-effort I've ever seen. It was so good. And I think from a character and story perspective as well, I will say I think that's really clever what they did there as well in terms of the plot with Unalaq and Tenzin and Korra's difficult decision. And I want to talk a bit more about Korra in a minute because I want to talk about Korra and Mako. But just in terms of the core plot of Korra has to kind of pick, right? To just have Unalaq. If that pause was not me remembering them, it was me remembering if it was Tonraq or Unalaq. Unalaq. For Korra to choose Unalaq, which is what needs to happen to drive this story forward, right? You have to sell me on that. And how do you sell me on Korra choosing Unalaq when she's been with Tenzin for so long? She's so attached to his family. There's so much trust there. And, you know, she was really struggling with that decision throughout this episode because she is frustrated with Tenzin's teaching style and she hasn't made a huge amount of progress in her spirit training with him. So you could argue that's enough, but because she has such a strong relationship with Tenzin, you find it hard to believe even that would be enough to make her go the other way. So what do? Well, spirit attacks, as Unalaq predicted it would, because he mentioned multiple times in the episode, and the episode starts with some random, some sort of random villagers, you know, on a boat doing some fishing, getting attacked by a spirit, and he's suggesting that they're throwing away of traditional values with this Glacier Spirit Festival is somehow upsetting the spirits. That's his implication. Having him just wander along and actually calm the spirit and demonstrate his ability to do it, prove that he can do it in front of Korra, is a brilliant move because it really helps the audience not feel too bitter to Korra for that choice. Because I think there's a version of this where you come out of this really hating Korra for choosing this guy over Tenzin. But when you see what he can do, you go, yeah. You know, if I was trying to learn a thing and there were two people that could teach me and one demonstrated clearly that he was far superior than the other guy, I'm going to go with that guy. You know, I'm choosing Unalaq over Tenzin. You know what I mean? Like, So you empathise with Korra's dilemma and then you understand her choice. It's really clever from a writing perspective.
Yeah, and you kind of the way, but you also emphasise with Tenzin slightly because you see that although she's justified in how she feels, and I completely agree with you. I'd make the same choice, and I think it's incredibly relatable. You do also get, especially through things like her flipping going into the Avatar state to win a game with his children,
Yes.
You do understand that she's being naive about whether she's actually mastered airbending. You know, as he says, she's mastered it in her way, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's mastered it properly. And I think that comes across as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Because I think, like, you've got... an interesting, like, because like you're heartbroken for Tenzin as much as you are, like, understanding of Korra's choices, especially like it's you know what it is. It's really sweet to see how affected Tenzin is by that choice because you can tell it really hurts him.
Which and you like you say, you are literally heartbroken for him. Like I was like, oh man, Tenzin.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's a good start, and I think it's a really good setup for the rest of the season. I think that is like I've still got a few more bits I want to pick on, but like. Overall, I do think this is a really good setup for a series arc. You know, whether we'll feel that they play that off correctly or not is a different issue. But that's a really interesting story and position to start our characters in for the series.
Yeah, I'm pumped for the rest of the series as a result of this episode. I thought they did a great job. What did you, in terms of like picking on specific bits? Did you think the Avatar state to win the game was as egregious as me?
Yes. I don't like it. I think I understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, because it tells us something about her character. Like the Glacier Spirits Festival, Korra is not taking her spiritual side seriously. She's using it to win a game, right? I understood the thematic link between the situation at the Southern Water Tribe and Korra's own journey. Right, and Unalaq wanting to write the course on both. Right, I get all of that. Makes perfect sense. Says a lot about where her character's at. All that jazz fits in with the themes. Practically speaking, I just don't. I think it diminishes the Avatar state because the Avatar state was only ever accessed in times of trauma and need. The idea that she can flick it on like a light switch. As Tenzin puts it, for like a booster rocket in a race, it's such a frivolous use of it. It diminishes her as a character, even though that's what they're going for in that point. But it really diminishes the Avatar state as a thing that can be used by the Avatar. I don't like it being used like a toy because I think it makes it too. It shows how easily she can access it. And any other fight this season now, we're just in a position of use the Avatar state. You can just switch it on. You've proven you can just switch it on whenever. So yeah, I didn't care for it. And it also made Aang look... I know Aang was a less experienced Avatar, but he really struggled to get into the Avatar state. And he's theoretically supposed to be more spiritually advanced than Korra. Korra is like a 0 on the spirit scale in terms of how connected she is to her spirits. So why is she getting into the Avatar state and connecting to her previous self so much easier than Aang did?
Yeah, that's another really good point. Yeah.
There's so many things about that.
It feels a bit contradictory.
Yeah, there's just so many elements of that I didn't like. And it's a shame because I do know why it's that. Like as I said, I think it really does do a good job of linking the themes and ideas that this episode portrays. So I'm not being like, what were they thinking? This isn't a what were they thinking moment. This is I totally understand what you were thinking, but I wish you'd find a different way to do it. moment because it doesn't quite work because of specifically the Avatar state and how it works. Unless you have anything else you want to add on that point, because then you kind of asked me about it and I ranted a little bit. I don't know if you have anything more to add on that.
No, I agree. No, I agree with everything else you said. Yeah.
In that case, then, I defer to you because I have a question, Chris, and you're the guy. This episode, right, features a sort of little mini arc with Avatar Korra and her ongoing romantic entanglement with Mako, right? This boyfriend girlfriend situation that just seems a little friction based. Now they got together in the last season, in a very quick moment where she was like, "I can't be with you right now. Oh, I got my powers back. Now we can be together," and we'll come back to that in a minute because we've got some stuff to talk about on that. Then Mako tries to give her his thoughts, and she doesn't like that. Oh, you're going to take Tens inside. Then later on, he just tries to be supportive. She throws that back in his face. And then at the end of the episode, she says, "I'm not sure I made the right decision." And he says, "I know your heart is in the right place. So you'll just have to trust it." Which is, again, a very nice, supportive thing for him to say. Now, in that occasion, she doesn't bite his head off. But in all the other occasions, she did. And she's a little bratty throughout this episode. Now, I have two questions based on what I've just said, Chris. Number one, has Korra slightly regressed as a character since last season? And two, does Mako need help? Should he be signalling for some assistance in this situation now? Do we need to get him out of this? Because this does not seem like a healthy relationship.
Yeah, I think I would come down on that side with you. I think you could make an argument if you wanted to that he just needs to be completely honest and not overthink. He indicates when he talks to what's the name of the basically the bison? It's not a bison, but their equivalent.
Oh, Naga.
Or is it Naga? Or is Naga a bison?
No, Naga is a polar bear dog.
No. That's it, right? So yeah, forgive me.
No,
just
no. I'm not. I will not forgive you, and neither will the commenters. Now you're trying to get yourself cancelled, Chris. I can hear the comments now. He doesn't remember any of the characters' names. He didn't remember that Naga was a polar bear dog, and he forgot Naga's name. How dare he?
It was such an unnecessary response from me. such unnecessary sass, I guess. But you can make an argument that he's overthinking it. That he's trying too hard one way, trying too hard another way, and at the moment that he gives up and is just honest, she responds and relates. But yeah, I think she is a little between that and the Avatar state stuff. I think she's I think she's regressed a little, but no more than Aang used to. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's very consistent. The notion that if you'd have said, in series 1, oh, she's going to beat the villain, but she's going to become a little bit cocky about it, in terms of saying things like, has everyone forgotten I beat Aman? Or has Tenzin forgotten I beat Aman? Or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. That kind of tracks with the character last year, so I don't think it's...
Right.
I don't think the character's regressed enough for it to be jarring. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that. I think that's where I land on that, even though I feel it throughout the episode. I'm like, is she regressed? Is she more bratty? Like, or am I just imagining more of a arc from the previous season than happened, and therefore I thought she was in a better place, maybe, and a bit more mature. So there was that element of it, but I think I landed on no, this is probably in line. She's probably not quite completed that arc to being a mature adult yet. What I thought was interesting, though, was her relationship with Mako, and I'm still not sure where I land on this, because I think she doesn't. I think one of the things that makes her come across worse in this episode is how she treats him. But one thing that did occur to me was I was thinking about it and thinking, like, is it that thing? And this isn't healthy or correct either, but is it that thing where the stress of what's going on with Tenzin, Unalaq, and that whole choice that she has in front of her is leading her to lashing out, and he's just sort of catching strays, like she's not really mad at him. She's just venting, and he's sort of, catching the bad end of it. I still don't think that's a particularly healthy behavior, but it goes some way to explaining why she is the way with him. She is with him, and I think what's nice, if that's what they were going for, the fact that they hold hands at the end of the episode sort of suggests he's being supportive and understanding to the point where he knows he wasn't at fault and that she doesn't think he was at fault. Like, she, again, was just sort of, like, lashing out because she was frustrated, and he understands that and isn't judging her for that. And that's, again, boyfriend bonus points in the Mako column, you know. Not only is he supportive throughout the whole episode, but by the end, he's kind of understanding that it wasn't really about him. And that's also very, very sort of kind and considerate of him, because I do think he'd be right to be mad a little bit about how she treated him throughout this episode, because she created a no-win situation for him throughout. No matter what he said, she got mad. So yeah, I think I'm still not sure where I land on it, but I think maybe that angle on it makes it passable, because that makes it kind of interesting from a character perspective. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that. So I think that's kind of where I've landed. But obviously it'll all depend on how it plays out throughout the season, which again, not giving away. Not giving away, Chris. We're talking about this episode. No spoilers for you, my friend.
I didn't ask for them, Dan. I didn't ask for them.
Tell that to your Wikipedia search history. Right. The last thing I wanted to talk about, your search history suggests very differently, Chris. That's all I'm saying.
I think my lack of ability to guess things right last season shows that I'm definitely not doing Wikipedia searches.
That's fair. Let's talk.
For those that don't know, that became a big running joke during Steven Universe, because I guessed a lot of things right. So the only logical conclusion was that I was Wikipediaing it.
Stand by it. Stand by it. Right.
I think I did also, when I caught up and was live, I think I did also not guess anything correctly, lending more to the Wikipedia.
To be fair, I think you did it a couple times in Last Airbender as well, where you got ahead of some stuff.
Yeah,
there were a couple of spooky moments. So I think when you watch as much TV as we do for our podcast, I think in general, like, you've a certain amount of pattern recognition. You start to pick up little hints.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, that theory of, like, it's not the theory of me thinking as I was watching that scene, he could be controlling the spirits and he could be a bad guy. Dodgy Rock. It doesn't. Like I say, you heard
Dodgy Rock.
You heard.
I'm not.
You heard it. That's what.
Hashtag
that
Dodgy
earlier?
Rock. No, I love it. I think it's great. Hashtag Dodgy Rock. I'm on it. I'm on board.
I said in my example, Mysterio it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I brought. It's not so much predicting the show. It's like you say, it's recognizing patterns.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. We watch so much TV. It's very hard for us to not spot those patterns sometimes. Very quickly, we haven't talked about Esker and Desna, who are the children of Dodgy Rock. And Bolin comes on to Esker, and we get one of my favourite exchanges, maybe in the show? I don't know, I'll have to think about this. But hell, if there was ever a quote of the week, it's, "You amuse me, I will make you mine. Like a boyfriend or a slave? Yes." So good. It's pitch perfectly written for Aubrey Plaza, who plays Esker, brilliantly, by the way, in this series.
How is that Audrey Plaza? Oh, that makes
yes, sense. Yeah. No, she's great in that role. I really, really like her in this.
They were like, all right, Audrey, we want you to be in Legend of Korra. Oh, brilliant animation! It's a voice part. I really get to stretch my muscles and do something different. No. We very much want Audrey Plaza. It's just, you only have to say it into a mic. All right, fine.
Yeah. Because what year is it? This is 2013, so Parks was well underway at this point. Yeah. So I think look, sometimes someone's just so good at a thing, it's kind of a waste to not make them do the thing. that they're so good at.
Yeah,
and I think she's
sure.
perfectly suited to Esker. And actually, we should thumbs up to the cast. Actually, we've complimented the cast of the show in the past. Obviously, Janet Varney doing Korra, and J.K. Simmons, Tenzin. They're all great. But some of the new cast this year so far, credit where credit's Lisa Edelstein, Cuddy from House, who plays Kaya. She's great. Richard Ryle, I think I'm pronouncing that right, plays Boomy, does a brilliant job. Aubrey Plaza obviously is Esker, and Aaron Himmelstein plays Desna and does a great job. We get more from Desna a little bit later in the series. He only has one line in this episode. And then, of course, John Michael Higgins as Varric does an incredible job. And actually, while we're on the subject of Varric, I didn't mention this. One of my favourite visual gags from this episode is Julie picking up Asami to talk to Varric. They don't reference it. It's not mentioned in dialogue at all. Julie just runs around and lifts Asami up from under the armpits. It's great. It's just a really funny visual gag, and I enjoyed it very much. I don't have any other notes or any other final thoughts before we move on to other bits. No, we talked about that. Man, I think we covered all this stuff, Chris. We were efficient and inefficient this week.
Well, that is that not the best combination?
I think it might be. There you go. All right, so shall we move on to the feedback from last series portion?
Yes. That hasn't got a jingle, has it? Feedback from... Oh, we can do what we did with Fringe Observers, where I'll do a different one every week.
Okay.
If you're up for that.
Yeah. Go for it.
Feedback from last year.
Hi, I'm Dan, and welcome to feedback from last year. So yeah, I don't know if we'll do this every episode because I don't know how much feedback we got from last series, but I'll try and make it a weekly thing. Why not? But one thing we got a lot, and
Dan already tired of the theme tune and trying to find out ways to avoid it.
Shh! Don't give it away. You figured out that I'm tired of the theme tune. Don't tell the listeners. I'm supportive.
Chris has got a recurring bit he's going to have some fun with that's slightly irritating for Dan. Oh, well, we can't have that. That situation's never been reversed, has it? Harry Potter wore 160 pairs of glasses throughout the franchise.
Daniel Radcliffe wore 160 pairs of glasses, Chris. Get it right, at the very least.
What did I say?
Harry Potter.
Oh, sorry. Apologies.
Harry Potter presumably just wore 1 or 2 pairs of glasses across the series. It was supposed to be the same set. But Daniel Radcliffe, Chris, I don't know if you're aware, during the course of the Harry Potter movies, went through 160 pairs. So, there you go. Anyway, so... last series, we got quite a lot of feedback on our thoughts on the final episode. And it was very interesting. A lot of people saying that we were basically wrong. Our theory... was we talked a lot about the last few minutes of that episode. It was a big problem for us. Because what we felt what was happening was the major arc for the series, Amon, had been wrapped up. That felt like the plan. Right? I think neither of us disagreed with that. He was set up in episode 1. His plan unravelled across the last few episodes. Defeated/murdered in the final episode. That felt pretty clear, right? That didn't feel like they U-turned into that. But what we did talk about was some plot threads that were left dangling, maybe as set up for a second series, as sort of ongoing elements, such as Korra's open-ended situation with Mako. She sort of tells him, I can't be with you right now. She loses all her powers, except for airbending. It's the only one she can still do. She seems to have lost her connection to the Avatar spirit. And there was one third one that I can't remember. But basically, they undid all of that in 2 minutes. Right at the end of the final episode, where all of a sudden she's like, oh, actually, I've got my powers back. Oh, and I can return everyone else's powers to them. Oh, and I guess that means I can be with Mako. Kiss, kiss. It was just head spinning. Because it felt like they'd left a couple of threads dangling to be sort of slightly ongoing things that would lead into a theoretical second season. And our theory at the time was that they had thought they were getting more seasons and then had a wobble they weren't, causing them to close the threads up in case they didn't get more. And everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people said, no, there was always a plan for this to be a multi-year show. That's just the choices they made. And it didn't make sense to me. And we were chatting about this in the Discord, and big thumbs up to the Discord. Well, the Discord in general. But Bianca, one of our listeners, long-time listeners from Stephen University days, who's been with us the whole time, big love to Bianca, said, well, here's some quotes from the Wall Street Journal. And I had a look at that Wall Street Journal article, and that article actually ended up being a bit of a rabbit hole for me that led to what I think is the answer. So, in response to the feedback from last series, I would like to read you some stuff from both that article and some other locations. So, first thing, when the show was conceived, according to that article, a quote from Brian Konietzko, one of the show's creators, when we first started talking to Nickelodeon about doing a new series in the Avatar world, they asked if we could do shorter arcs, more like a show like 24, where there's a specific villain or challenge for that particular season. So, it appears, when the show was ordered, that was the notion. But one villain or character per season doesn't mean character stuff or smaller threads won't cross over between them. It doesn't preclude that. And then the article later goes on to confirm that it was initially ordered, the run of 11 episodes that was the first season, and at a later date they added the 14-episode order that made up Series 2. So the question then becomes, when? Where were they up to in production when that happened? So, was there anything that happened as well that might have led them to believe Nickelodeon might not renew the show? So, I have a quote here from a YouTube channel called Innerview, and this is an interview with UJ Myun, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, apologies if I'm not, who mentioned that Nickelodeon were not sold on the series during production of Series 1 because of the female protagonist. The quote is, the production was suspended just because the protagonist was a girl. So, put yourself in the shoes of Mikey and Bri Bri, creators of all things Avatar. They've got the show, they've launched, they've had 11 episodes ordered, they've planned the Amon arc, they're wrapping that up, they're leaving a couple of threads open. This bit is partly speculation, so that's the facts, here's some speculation. The show nearly doesn't even continue. The production stalls because Nickelodeon are nervous about it. Nickelodeon have come out and said that their concerns were more about like the age range that it was aimed at and stuff, but they've never commented on this element of it. But I believe the people from production that that's what happened. What do? You've got a show with some dangling threads. You're finishing up writing season 1. They've still not ordered season 2, and we know that because here's a quote from Michael DiMartino from March 2011, 8th of March, is when it was published in the Wall Street Journal, where he says, "We've written all the episodes. Episodes have been shipped to the overseas animation studios, and they're animating away as we speak. So we're kind of in the middle of things right now. All the vocal cast has been picked up and recorded. All the scripts have been recorded." So that was his interview with the Wall Street Journal on the 8th of March 2011. That same article refers to it as having been recently picked up for 14 more episodes. So at that point, on the 8th of March 2011, when they were long past the script writing stage, animations were happening, casts had already recorded everything, that's when they got picked up. So I posit my theory that during season 1, prior to getting that season 2 pickup, they closed those threads last minute in order to protect themselves should that second season not come. Why did they have that concern? Season 2 hadn't been ordered, and they'd already had production stalled once because Nickelodeon were nervous about a show with a female protagonist. Boom.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly seems to make sense to me, for sure.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I've dug up. It tracks with what happens in the show physically, and it tracks with the facts we've got from those articles. And again, big thank you to Bianca for digging up that Wall Street Journal article. It was a very interesting read, and it was a big source of information for this. And even when I started researching independently, that same article kept reappearing because it was so relevant to this. So yeah, massive thank you for pointing that one out. So how are you feeling about that now, knowing that is the situation, Chris? Does that tracks? Like, do you stand by what we said last season about how that felt, our theory?
Yes, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I absolutely stand by everything we said last season. You know, even if that's the reason for it, in terms of its
detriment to the episode. But it's difficult in retrospect because I really like the Spirit storyline. I really liked this episode. I really liked the season this episode sets up. I think it's actually probably more interesting on reflection than what could have been set up with her losing her powers. So I feel differently about it, but not because of that information. I feel differently about it because of this episode and because it was so good.
Right. And I think what's interesting as well is, no, I don't think anyone who commented and said that's not what happened, the show was always renewed as multiple seasons, is
of course, yeah.
I don't think they were technically wrong either. That's why this is such an interesting one, because the show was clearly designed to be self-contained seasons early on, and if they're remembering that quote from Brian Konietzko where he basically said that each arc was planned to be a one-season thing, I could see how then people would go like, well, no, that was always the plan. And I think that's true as far as like Amon and the overall story of the season goes, but I don't think that's true for where we left Korra, those last few threads. So yeah, I think hopefully that puts a bit of a rubber stamp on that one, at least from our perspective. Still, people might disagree with us or might come up with new evidence, and feel free to debate in the comments. But I don't feel any need for us to go back to that as a topic now, unless something new crops up. Because I think, for me, reading all those quotes kind of backs up exactly what I thought had happened. When the show was renewed in early 2011, they'd already sent off, as far as I can tell, the audio that had already been recorded for scripts that had already been completed to the studios to be animated. They were literally just waiting for the animation to come back. To me, that's a show that's basically complete. And then it got renewed for season 2 for another 14 episodes. So, yeah.
Certainly feels that way.
So, yeah, certainly, yeah. But it feels that way. The evidence lines up roughly with that. I don't have an exact quote that says, yes, we definitely changed the ending of Korra season 1 to do it. So there is an element of speculation in there, but I think the speculation lines up with the facts. So I think for now, unless some new evidence crops up or we get to interview them ourselves, I think that's where we're going. That's where we're standing. So, Chris, are you ready to move on to the trivia for this particular episode of Korra? Very quickly. I'll blast through it.
Let's trivia it up!
I'm going to give you some trivia. So, the new members of the Fire Ferrets do, of course, jokingly resemble Mako and Korra, although they've reversed the elements that they bend. So the one that looks like Mako is a waterbender, and the one that looks a bit like Korra is a firebender. The new firebender of the Fire Ferrets also resembles the fan who cosplayed as Korra during the firebending championships, firebending championship in the previous year. Yeah, very possible that it could be that same character, or they just borrowed the design. Either way, that's fine. One of the network's notes on this episode involved expanding the gag of Pema throwing and catching her groceries in the air. They wanted it to occur throughout Book 2, with her fumbling around with other items like laundry. The recommendation did not pan out, as the creators felt a 1950s scenario didn't fit with their style of humour. Agreed. No, that would not have worked. Don't like it.
No, for sure.
Yeah. The moving picture that Varric shows to Asami and Bolin is, of course, familiar to those of us who are aware of the Sally Gardner at a Gallop, or Horse in Motion, which is the very first footage, arguably, ever filmed. Like, they were trying to figure out. They were trying to figure out if a horse during a gallop ever has all four hoofs off the ground, because they were watching a horse run. And it looked like there's a moment where it's literally not touching the ground at all. And they couldn't figure it out. So what they did was they set a bunch of cameras along a track and had a jockey ride through. And every time there was like a thread that would pull and set off each camera. And then they had a sequence of photos that showed every moment in a horse's gallop. But when played together in succession, footage. And that allowed them to, one, prove indeed horses do completely leave the ground when galloping. There is a point when all four hooves are off the ground, which is pretty cool. But also, sort of was one of the steps on the way to inventing film. And the footage in this episode of Varric's invention is footage of some sort of animal running the opposite direction to the horse from the Horse in Motion video, but clearly inspired by a very similar sort of shot.
Wow, shows how uncultured and knowledgeable I am about film. I assumed that was based on the Mickey Mouse on the on the boat thing.
Oh, really? Oh yeah, what's it? Steamboat Willie.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I thought that was. I mean, I've always loved that footage. It's incredible footage, but it's just really interesting because when it showed up on this, I was like, nudging like Nadia, like, look, it's the thing. But also, I think this is footage that was. If anyone who saw the movie Nope last year because I remember being shown this in like college. The horse in motion as part of my film course, but I remember. Obviously, last year it was kind of came back to the forefront through the movie Nope, which had a whole piece about that footage, and also the fact that we know the name of the horse but not the name of the jockey, who happens to be black. Says a lot. No one knows who the jockey in that famous footage is. But yeah, that came up in the movie Nope last year, and I think that sort of rekindled somewhat interest in that footage or knowledge in that footage, kind of brought that back into the forefront of pop culture stuff. So it was maybe why it was so easily recognizable, maybe to me watching it now. But obviously, this episode's from 2013, so they were making that reference long before Nope did. So yeah, but it's cool. I think it's cool that that's referenced. Tonrock's description of Unalaq's visit to the Southern Water Tribe are similar to Ozai's welcome to Zuko after the former's imprisonment at the end of the 100-Year War. Yeah, okay. I don't know why I kept that one in. Sure. There were a bunch of people waiting to greet them when they got there. Sure. That's not trivia. That's just what happened in the episode. The water shooting booth features targets that have the same chibi design of Aang that was used in the super deformed shorts. In the episode's DVD commentary, Brian Konietzko stated that Aang's chibi design, being a part of an in-universe attraction, was a fun and organic way to include the design in the show. I liked that very much. I will say, though, we don't normally do goofs, Chris. Animation mess-ups. Because it's like, his coat is a slightly different shade of blue in one shot to the other, or this item moved from the left hand to the right hand, or they've got an extra finger if you freeze frame it here. I don't care. None of that is relevant to me. But I will say, this is the first time I've ever noticed a goof that made me chuckle, and now wanted to include, is there are 6 water guns on that booth, Chris, but only 5 targets. So someone is shooting at nothing.
Fair.
Maybe chuckle. I think as well, I do like the use of like Aang iconography, because he, even though 70 years ago now, the lasting impact of, keeping in mind, Aang visited. And Aang was found at the Southern Water Tribe and then went on to save the world. Like, he visited that tribe multiple times. He went traveling with 2 people from that tribe. It makes a lot of sense that the Southern Water Tribe would still be honouring Aang. He has a lot of roots there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, Christ, he married someone from that tribe. Like, yeah, Aang has a lot of roots there. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, who literally still lives there. We don't know for sure. He didn't, presumably, we don't know for sure. We didn't see him die, did we, last year? So we don't know for sure he didn't end his days there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, 100%. 100%. The carnival barker for the water shooting booth also had more lines of dialogue in the original script, including a helpful jingle on how to play the game. That sounds funny, but for time, I don't really see any reason not to cut that. I don't think that's good enough to, unless the jingle was really good, I don't see any reason why you'd keep that in this episode. Keep it tight, I say. Even though I have not adhered to that logic this episode. Tenzin's attempt to reason with dark spirits is a nod to how his father, Aang, tried to talk to the hostile spirits in the original series. I don't know if you remember that episode where there was the sort of, I think was it Ko? No, Po? There was like Po because it's a panda. I think I've just done a accidental reference to Kung Fu Panda. But there's a panda spirit in the town, and Aang doesn't know how to deal with it because he's not been taught any spirit stuff, because he was Avatar for all of about 3 seconds before he got frozen. So he's just like, spirit, what can I help? Then it whacks him away. So yeah, I think that's very funny that Tenzin tries the exact same tactic in this episode. Interestingly, Rebel Spirit is the first episode in the Avatar series to have a little scene between the intro and the title card, which is the shot of the 2 sailors getting bombarded. We didn't talk about this, but I also really enjoyed using the previously on as a way not to tell us what previously happened in the show, but to catch us up on what's happened in the last few months of the characters' lives. Thought that was a very clever tactic and worked really well.
Yeah, I did. I thought that worked very well. I was like, oh, that's quite cool, and when no sort of previously on came up, I was like, what? I need the previously on peeps. And then, yeah, they did that, and I thought that was good.
Yeah, agreed. So this is the first episode of Legend of Korra not to be written by either Michael Dante DiMartino or Brian Konietzko, and was the first not to be directed by either Joaquim Dos Santos or Ki Hyun Ryu. Apologies again if I'm pronouncing names incorrectly. Instead, this was written by Tim Hedrick and directed by Colin Heck. So yeah, that's just some new blood for second season, basically, in terms of talent. I think that also says something about the gap, maybe, between production of season 1 and production of season 2, that they had enough time to cultivate a new writing and directing team. Whereas if they'd been produced in tandem, it probably would have been the same creative forces. But they were able to draft in some new blood, which is good. Again,
Agreed.
We talked about how the episode had some cool moments of action, visuals, and, I also really liked Mako's little battle at the beginning of the episode where he's chasing those two guys on the bike. That looked cool. Yeah, visually a great episode. And the music's really good, but the music's always really good in this show. And all the versions of this show. So it's one of those things we don't talk about very often because it's just always good, and it becomes tiring to say that every week. But it's good to recommend and represent the work of the people who did it, because they made it function. So there you go.
Agreed.
So Chris, with that in mind, do you want to know does the people want to know where they can find us?
I would hope so, Dan. Where can the people find us?
Well, a few different places, dear listeners. Patreon.com/nothingbutstatic. If you'd like to support this show, you get episodes 1 week early. So if you want to see the next episode right now, if you're thinking, God, I'd love to hear what Dan and Chris think of The Southern Lights, which is the title of the next episode, just go over to the Patreon. As little as $1 a month, you get that. That is assuming you're listening to this on Spotify or iTunes or YouTube. Of course, if you're already listening to this on Patreon, tough luck. You got to wait a week. You gotta wait a week. That's what you get for paying. I'm really selling it, aren't I? We also have bonus content every month. We have a special piece of content we put up on the first. Nothing But Lyrics has been what we've been up to, where we've been doing picking a song, making fun of the lyrics, or trying to decipher what indeed they mean. Very exciting, so keep your ears out and your eyes open and all of your various senses alert for those. Man, you can tell it's been... I'm starting to lose my mind slightly here because I'm starting to say weird shit. You can also get us, if you have any thoughts on this episode, on YouTube or email, youtube.com/nothingbutstaticuk. If you want to leave a comment on the episode in question, on this episode, if you've got any thoughts about any of this, or wish to yell at us some more about the fact that we asserted that last season was designed to be multiple. Or you can email us, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk. We do have Twitter, but we don't really use it anymore, so it's twitter.com, obviously, /Dan Doolan, or Nothing But Static without the G if you want to get us there, or C Billingham with 2 M's if you want to get in touch with Chris. But again, we don't really check those now. I wouldn't recommend it. Of course, if you sign up to the Patreon, you can get access to our Discord server where you can talk directly to us there.
It's a fun time, the Discord server. It's always pretty active. It's a good community there. Good crop of people.
Yeah. We've got a small little listenership, but they're really good folk. I'd rather have a small group of decent folk than a large group and of a bunch of knobheads. No knobheads. That's our rule.
Yeah.
But no, there's
nothing but static, no knobhead rule.
Yeah, the Nothing But Static, no knobhead rule. But yeah, no, I think there's been some really interesting chat on there about like Across the Spider-Verse, Guardians Volume 3, and then we did some talk about the Owl House in the last week on there. A few comments going back and forth. So yeah, there's some stuff. But if you want to join in on that and get exclusive access to our Yellow Lounge, which is the special feed, the discussion feed on the Discord, or whatever you call it, channel, that's just for patrons, in there I usually reveal ahead of time what we're reviewing on Rewind Reviews next season, and some other bits and bobs. Like usually the patrons find out what we're up to before we sort of put it out publicly. So if I can, I always give them early information. It's another reason to sign up for the Patreon. I will say it's for as little as $1 a month. You can pay any amount you like, or no amount. If you want to support us in a way that costs no money, just keep listening. Or if you want to put a bit more effort in that, then you're welcome to like and subscribe in all the various platforms. You can review in-app, Chris. I don't know if you're aware of this. Just go on the app, whatever your podcast catcher of choice is, they've got a review system. And if you tell the app that you like this podcast, then it's more likely to recommend us to other people who use that app. Good system.
I've never heard it referred to as podcast catcher of choice, but I like it.
Yes. Well, there's so many of them now, isn't there? Because I use Overcast and thought a lot of people did. And I don't think many people use Overcast anymore. I think I'm like an old man. I'm behind the times. I think there's several more popular podcast options now. But I will say, if you've got a podcast catcher that's not iTunes or Spotify, like an app that's just you put the RSS feeds into. We have an RSS feed for our patrons, so you don't have to keep going to Patreon and downloading the file, putting it on your device. You can just literally put the RSS feed in, use your Patreon login details, and get access to the Patreon feed through your normal podcast app. So you get the episodes a week early, and there's no extra hassle in doing it. I'd say they were ad-free, but no one sponsors this show, so... But I think that's everything. Yeah. Thank you all very much for listening. We love you to bits. I've talked an awful lot between the trivia, my moaning about the stuff from last week, and the closing. So I'm so sorry, Chris, while you've sat there for 30 minutes while I've ranted away.
No, it's all good. It's been a pleasure. What?
No, it's just... I know you meant that sincerely, but that could not have sounded more sarcastic if you'd meant it to.
I still don't think it sounded as sassy as "forgive me."
Sorry, buddy. Hopefully next week it'll be a bit more balanced at the end.
It wasn't half an hour. I'm great. Honestly, Dan, given the choice between listen to you do all the end stuff or do it myself, I'll take listening to you anytime.
Yeah, I actually have to remember everything and do all the research for the trivia.
Have you heard me try to do it? Me try to do it takes about an hour because I'm like, email is, well, it could be this, might be this actually. I can't really remember, guys. Twitter, we're not on there, but if we were, it would be, and then you just hear. As I try and Google it, so yeah, don't ever apologise for that.
Yeah, I feel like between my research / rant about discovering what happened with the last season of this, the triv, and then the outro, I think it all added up to just a lot of me talking. So I am sorry.
You're golden.
Sorry to the listeners and to you, Chris. You could have just gone home. You could have been enjoying your Saturday half an hour ago, mate.
You're all good.
Anyway, thank you everyone for listening. We love you to bits. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And come back in a week's time when we sit down to review The Southern Lights.